Hello, I'm Veronica Combs, and this is the Quantum Spin by HKA Marketing Communications. Today, we're talking with James Sanders, who is a cloud and quantum computing analyst for CCS Insight. He explains quantum computing to people who maybe aren't fully up to speed on this powerful technology. So thanks for joining us today, James. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Veronica.
We have a little personal history together. We were both at TechRepublic.
So we've had a lot of overlap, haven't we?
So you were there and I joined, and then you were covering quantum computing, and I thought that sounds really complicated. I'm glad James is covering that. And then you left, and I thought, well, someone needs to pick up this beat. So I picked it up, and here I am at HKA, and here you are at CCS, still talking about quantum computing. So I think that's a good thing. How do you explain your job to friends and relations? How do you tell them what you do every day?
I guess the easiest way to explain what a cloud and quantum analyst is just to tell people that I help tech companies explain what it is they do for people. And it's really easy for people to get kind of lost in the weeds of the technical details of, I'm building X, Y, or Z. It's the bigger picture. It's what can you do with this stuff that I help tech companies explain to their potential customers.
And I think there's a lot of overlap between journalism and analyst world, at least outside looking at it would seem to be. Is that the case?
There's definitely a lot of storytelling that happens in both of them. It is, I mean, it's quite similar, I think, to marketing in certain ways because it is market communications, right? And the difference is that I work with a lot of companies, but I have to remain neutral for all of them. The value of an analyst is really in candor. You want to pay an analyst for their unfiltered opinion and their honest opinion, because if you're getting a biased output, the value is not quite there. So you really do have to check all of your biases to the extent that you can. And there's always going to be a little bit that creeps in just because that's how humans are.
I knew you to be a rather direct person when we worked together, so I imagine that diplomacy and political tact is something you've worked on over the last few years as an analyst.
It's definitely been a crash course for me in certain ways. In this sort of role, it's incredibly cross-functional because some days you're talking, to the CEO of a company, and the cloud space is very different from the quantum space. In cloud, it's really a lot of SaaS stuff. And sure, there's hardware with the hyperscalers, but it's really people with business degrees that are getting into a business, whereas quantum is scientists who are getting into business, and those
Right.
constituencies are very different.
Very different. Yes,
And
indeed.
when those technical founders start bringing in business people to deal with, the business parts of a business, of running a business, there can be a little bit of culture clash between those two groups. There is, I think, a little bit of analyst work that is kind of mediating those 2 points within a company. It's really a job that changes day to day, depending on, just the needs of who it is you're talking to.
But that keeps it interesting, right?
I'm always on my toes, which is why I have a standing desk.
Do you roll that out for every podcast that you're interviewed on, James?
I literally just thought of that on the spot.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad it's fresh. Um, so I was going to say that I know that you've always been interested in technology, and you lived in Japan for a while, and then you came back to the States, and certainly wrote about technology for TechRepublic. What made you decide to start writing about quantum computing?
It's funny you mentioned that because my first entry into quantum computing was an editor assignment. I, being very honest with you, knew nothing about quantum computing at the time. And so I thought, okay, so in order to write this, I'm going to have to, do a crash course in quantum computing. And that turned out to be a lot of reading for me. You just kind of start out with Mike and Ike, and things get a little bit easier from there, and also substantially harder from there.
Substantially harder, that's right.
And so I went through that and a lot of other reading, and I thought, okay, I'm adequately informed to write about a 1,500-word article on quantum computing after having read a book and several more things. In the first 6 months after that was published, the rate of change, this was 2016, I think. The
Oh,
rate of
was it
change
that
in
long
quantum
ago?
computing in that first 6 months, yeah, was amazing. And it's only really ramped up from there as an industry. Because of that first article, I just kept writing about and kept writing about. And I had gone to a different group called 451 Research, and they were starting a quantum program as well. And so it was kind of a 2-for-1 for them. Like, you get a cloud analyst and a quantum analyst, like someone who's been writing about both for several years. And so they were really quite pleased with that. And it's something that I've just brought with me over to CCS Insight as well.
It is funny that you would say that, because when you left, I got the assignment of updating that very article. I think it got much longer in my update, but I did certainly have a very strong structure to work on. So since you have been reading about and writing about quantum computing more than lots of people, is there any enduring misconception that you keep having to explain, or keep having to set people straight on?
The thing about quantum computing is that there's kind of always misconceptions with security. Everyone is very concerned about the prospect of a quantum computer factoring a prime number that could be used to break public key encryption. And there is a risk there, but the expense that would incur, even when a quantum computer is capable of doing that, is astronomically high still. It's possible. It's making the impossible possible, but it's still going to be a really expensive operation. And so the idea that you can capture a lot of data today, just a sieve, basically. Just take the fire hose of data, store it, and we'll deal with it years down the road when we have a quantum computer that can deal with this. The idea that you can do that and then use a quantum computer to decrypt all of that information is a little bit unrealistic in terms of like intelligence gathering. It's not finding the needle in a haystack, it's finding the hay in a needle stack.
Which in theory would be easier, right? But yes,
There's quite a lot of pain that you're going to put yourself through going through that
yes.
strategy.
That is one of the big challenges about communicating about quantum computing, because it will have all this power and it could break public encryption, but it's not going to happen tomorrow or next week or maybe even next year. And so you have this sort of dual, it's really big, but not yet. How do you help your clients? I mean, how do you advise them on how to put both the potential and the peril in like a, 2023, 2024 perspective?
Kind of stepping back from security, there's a lot of nearer term applications for quantum computers before they get to the scale required to factor primes. Looking into like optimization tasks, those are a little bit nearer term, and they could be a bit more interesting before, the probably decades out idea of breaking public key encryption. A lot of business problems are optimization problems fundamentally. Like, you have a process and it needs to be a little more efficient.
Right. And in the financial world, a little bit of optimization can really increase your return. I mean, people get that, right? It's not like you're talking directly about ions or quantum chemistry or things like that.
It is a little bit challenging sometimes to try to get people to focus on the outcome and not the technology. And I enjoy talking about the technology behind quantum computing. Don't get me wrong, but the outcome is what is going to matter for business. I really do think quantum is going to be a thing. It's going to be something that does impact a lot of businesses in the future. You can do the preparation for it now, but I'm not here doing the all quantum all the time thing, because there's problems that need to be solved now, and there's probably more efficient ways in quantum computing today to solve those problems. But quantum's definitely going to be a thing. My paycheck does not depend on quantum being a thing. And that, I think, gives me a huge amount of latitude in being forthright about how small-scale quantum computers are today.
I think it can be hard to know what is a real accomplishment and what is just a little bit of fluffy blog post that maybe without a lot of weight behind it. So I've been asking all of our guests sort of to help us understand how to do a hype check. How do you determine when something is a real advance and when something is just maybe nice to read about, but not worth commenting on further?
So the way that I would typically go about figuring out, is this anything? there's a really easy way to make things look better by using estimations rather than measurements. And those are not of equal weight. That is, I think, the most consistent problem in quantum computing and communicating what the value of quantum computing will be, is there's an over-reliance on estimation of expectation of a future result. And those results have not consistently come to bear. And that risks disillusioning the market. The idea of quantum winter has come up several times because there's a certain parallel to draw to artificial intelligence. The idea that you can, go to market with an estimation of what you'll be able to do in the future. Even if you have something that is modestly cool now, I think is not a particularly wise decision. I would have a higher opinion of things that are measured rather than estimated for that reason.
As long as the scale is clear, right? Like the industry has gone back and forth about its number of qubits. No, it's quantum volume. No, it's algorithmic qubits. It's logical qubits. I mean, there's a lot of measurements out there, and settling on one has been a challenge, I think. But some kind of measurement to show performance. That's what you're looking for? Or just ability?
The ability to demonstrate performance. Like you have to have something that is ultimately reproducible. And there's a certain budget that you need in order to reproduce these results. And, a prospective buyer will probably want to try to reproduce what you've already done before experimenting with their own thing. And not every buyer does that, by all means. You have to have very technically informed people to really get a check signed for a quantum computer. And that is one of the benefits of these cloud platforms, is that it's relatively low risk. You're, paying for time, you're paying for access. You're not paying to have something carted out to a data center, which is usually a multi-million-dollar affair.
What's your take on quantum winter versus quantum spring in the coming year in 2024?
It's not a quantum winter that we're seeing. It's the market is really distracted. And frankly, I think it's good that the market is really distracted because it's going to give engineers time to build rather than time to, try to fight down all of the misconceptions, all of the distractions that keep people from being able to do the interesting part of the work, which is building, right? Analysts, and I think that, marketing professionals are or can be equipped to be quite good to take some of that load off of the engineers. Having engineers spending all of their time fighting misconceptions is a bad use of everyone's time. We explain things to the market, fundamentally, is the core of our jobs. And we should be very well equipped to do that. I think there's maybe a little bit more buzz than there is a market for AI. A lot of the former blockchain, a lot of the former cryptocurrency people move to generative AI as their target, because to them, it's fundamentally the same. To them, it's, we're going to try to create value out of nothing. And having that distraction is actually amazing for quantum computing, because as long as the people who are not getting into this market with particularly good intentions are distracted by shiny other stuff, a decreased focus on quantum for the next year is actually pretty good for scientists. It's good for the science behind it, and it's good for development. And so I'm not concerned about quantum winter in that regard. Things are getting funded. The startup capital market is a little challenging. It's a little harder to raise another round right now than it would have been a couple of years ago. I don't know that next year is going to be the year that changes that. The interest rate has not helped things. But if you have a sufficiently technically informed investor who is comfortable with the idea of this isn't a SaaS startup and it's going to take a little while to get a return on investment, then you can do it. I'm not particularly concerned about the prospects for quantum computing. The road is long, but we've always known the road is long. I would caution everyone in this industry that you really have to be a good steward of the science. Overhyping something now could be detrimental to the industry as a whole. Don't cut down a tree when all you need is an apple.
the long-term effects can be bad for everyone. What are you looking forward to for next year? Are there any companies, or maybe you don't want to mention a company, a modality, or any developments or research that you're keeping your eye on?
I am relatively convinced that there will be a modality that is not superconducting and not ion trap that is going to wind up being the technology that really gets quantum computing to quantum advantage, probably by the end of the decade. And that seems, to some people, that seems like it might be a little bit far-fetched. But I am convinced you have all of the engineers looking into superconducting qubits. And with the exception of like Alice and Bob, these are quite often Americans. And as Americans, Veronica, I can say we're often quite loud. It gets a lot more media attention. Superconducting requires a huge upfront investment in building to really achieve. So the companies behind these have quite large PR budgets. For years, when people heard about quantum computing, they were hearing about superconducting systems. And then sort of the second wave of that was ion traps, which are really pursued mostly at the moment by American companies. And so it kind of falls into the same category. And there's a lot of modalities that are from people who are less noisy and with qubits that are less noisy. Helium on electron, there's about a dozen, maybe 16 or 18 experts in that globally. And they're mostly Scandinavian. And they're not as loud about the research that they're doing. And because they also require a smaller upfront investment to achieve, I think that the ramp up for those in the next couple of years is going to be quite fast, really.
I appreciate that perspective about loud voices and other modalities, and it is a struggle to get people to focus on neither superconducting nor ion traps. So
I say with a superconducting poster behind me, too.
Well, thank you, James, for joining us today. I really appreciate all your time. Be sure to check out this year's predictions from CCS Insight. Any place we can find you online? I think, did you tell me Mastodon and Blue Sky?
Yes. So, of course, you can find me at the CCS Insight blog. That's at ccsinsight.com. To reach out to me directly, send me an email. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. That's the value of an analyst, is access. So it's james.sanders@ccsinsight.com.
Well, thanks again for all your time, and best wishes for a good rest of the year.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for having me on, and best wishes for you for the rest of the year as well.